exceptional real estate market we're dealing with right now, which is why we have two amazing guests, Phil Crone with the Dallas Builders Association and Daniel Gonzalez with Gonzalez Public Affairs and Consulting. Thanks, guys, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, we promise this will be an informative one, and I hope we also have a lot of good questions in the chat. And this is a topic that all of us are dealing with a lot of additional layers right now, whether it's working with different municipalities with permitting and different building issues, infrastructure issues, or supply chain shortages. The building industry is unfortunately not really having a great couple of years right now. And that's obviously the trickle down effect for our realtor friends as well. So we wanted to kind of frame tonight's show in a way to get good information out there, start talking about discussions, and truly shining a little bit of a light on what really the bigger problems are at bay and how we can change the dialogue and how we can be a vehicle for changing that, pushing that towards progress and not just sitting here and complaining about all of the things we're going in with right now. But I'm going to start off with one thing with Phil, because I got this article in my messenger that you guys shared, and that was talking about D.R. Horton is no longer building 2 stories in a neighborhood in Aubrey. So let's start with a polarizing thing, because that gets clicks and questions, and then we'll roll from there. But Phil, can you kind of talk about a little bit what does that even mean, no more 2 stories?
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we can keep it real the whole time here, but I think that's just indicative of what's going on right now in the home building world. And the biggest challenge that we have is it's essentially a dystopian market for materials. We're playing whack-a-mole every day. I had a quote, I think, in the same article that said that builders are going to work with the materials that they have and not the materials that they want. And here is D.R. Horton, the worldwide leader in home building. And in some communities, they can't get the trusses, the braces, to the joists to be able to build the 2-story homes that many families are expecting and looking for in that community. And if that stuff was available, they'd otherwise provide. But I see it in a whole bunch of other things. I mean, there are big production builders that are raiding a local Best Buy just to try to buy up all the appliances that they have so they can close homes, because this, everyone keeps saying it's the worst shortage since World War II. So basically in anybody's recent or professional memory, this is as bad as it gets. And I just don't see it turning around anytime soon.
Okay, so what is, and I think, again, you guys are such a great resource for everybody listening. If you don't like the Dallas Builders Association Facebook page or follow Phil or the Dallas Builders Association on LinkedIn, you're doing yourself a disservice to keep in the know of what's going on that side, because building and infrastructure has such a huge implication on our real estate market. And so if you primarily do resales, it doesn't matter. You need to know what's going on in the building industry, because that's impacting our resale market incredibly right now. There's so many people that would normally gravitate towards new construction, but the product just isn't there. And I think I saw it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is it around 3 million homes that we're short nationally right now?
Yeah, that's about right. And as you're mentioning, that's the tip of the spear right now in terms of the inventory that we don't have that would otherwise be being built to accommodate the growth that we're seeing here. We built, or started at least, over 60,000 homes in the DFW area last year, but had builders had everything that they wanted, it could have been and should have been maybe closer to 75,000. And it's going to be the same situation this year. Worse the last couple of years because of the pandemic and bad policy, but we've been underbuilding for quite a long time for a lot of reasons that we may get into later on in the show.
You're so good, Phil. You start teeing up things that gets people excited. It's like leaving little breadcrumbs here. But I loved how you said bad policy, because that's Daniel Gonzalez's wheelhouse over here. He loves bad policy, or else he'd be out of a job. So Daniel, talk about a little bit of what that means in regards to the building specifically. What are some bad policies that we're seeing going on that maybe is inhibiting, more home starts, or, even making it more cost prohibitive for builders to build? Uh-oh. I think Phil, can you hear Daniel?
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Now I
Okay,
can.
good. Boom.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and yes, bad policy or good policy, it's the gift that keeps on giving, I guess. But it's not just in the Dallas market; it's really all over, Texas and all over the U.S. But first you start with a permitting process. That's kind of where you have to start, and that's at the local level. And depending on where you are, Dallas, certainly has its own challenges. Austin, Houston, every other local entity has their challenges. But as you prolong that process, it just adds to the overall cost. And I think what a lot of elected officials fail to realize is that ultimately that final cost is borne by the consumer. So yes, it does add cost to the builder and to everyone in the pipeline, but ultimately it's the consumer who's paying more, for that product. So really, I have to look at the permitting process. That's where it begins. Certainly, I think local entities can do a lot better of streamlining that process, getting that permit line a lot shorter, if you will. But then once you look past that, you have to look at some zoning as well, and how and what type of product can or should be built in a certain area. There's a lot of words, that kind of be, they're always out there. But one that I love to hear all the time is, cities like to, especially, in the Dallas area, they like to preserve the character of the neighborhood. And that sounds great, and I mean, I think we would all agree with those words, but what does it actually mean? What are you actually preserving? Are you preserving single family residential and then are you preventing multifamily? Are you preventing a duplex or triplex or fourplex? And if you look in many cities across Texas and across the U.S., I mean, typically, if you look at those neighborhoods that were built in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, you typically have a really wide spectrum of product that's available, from a 8,000 square foot mansion, 1.5, 2 acres, to single family 2,500 square feet, all the way down to a duplex, even a fourplex, or even an eightplex, apartment complex. So you really had a lot of that early on when we were building, but you don't really see that today. You really just see, Phil, don't take this the wrong way, but it's kind of cookie cutter, if you will. It's 2,500 square feet, 3 sides brick, whatever it may be, 3 bedroom, 3.5 bath, and that's fine. But we don't really have the diversity, if you will, in these neighborhoods. And I think that ultimately, leads to, some affordability issues that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later on as well. But yeah, there's a whole host of bad policies, I think, that are out there, but a lot of it, it can be geared towards permitting and then also zoning as well.
I've got a cookie cutter story if you want it.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do a cookie cutter story.
City of Frisco, a few years ago, they said that they wanted to go with this form-based code, or something that was kind of based or inspired by form-based code, which is a whole different theory that I don't have time to get into. But they essentially said, hey, we need to have the same architectural restrictions. We need to have, the same undulations on the facade. We need to, have all these things that are very similar if we want to have a distinct brand that Frisco, Texas would have. Well, a few years go by, and the next thing you know, city leadership are coming back to us about an anti-monotony ordinance. Well, you ordinanced the monotony already, so just unordinance that, and then you've got your monotony problem solved. So that's something I think we're seeing. We got a bill passed a couple sessions ago that addresses that to a certain extent and allows for a more diverse housing stock to come up. But we still have a lot of problems with architectural restrictions, lot size minimums, ADU prohibitions, not to mention an army of armchair building officials on Nextdoor now that we can thank.
Oh my goodness, that's a whole nother topic of the Nextdoor app, who wants to, yes, armchair quarterbacks there. But I think that's huge. And something that Daniel said kind of spurred something else going on in my mind, which could be dangerous. However, tell me if I'm wrong, Phil, specifically with what you're saying. The cities can restrict certain product that or certain things that would make it cost prohibitive, maybe for a quality production builder or a quality production multifamily builder, single family or multifamily builder, to want to come in and create quality products. So in turn, we have these one-offs that come in with a more lackluster product that see an opportunity to come in and scoop up some tear down lots, some other things like that. And then they come in and they produce product that is much lower end or not what we want to see, kind of infiltrating some of these growing areas, because they don't have the same margins required. A production builder or a larger company is going to require some sort of metrics to be able to be attained versus somebody coming in, buying 3 or 4 lots and putting not predatory products, but just stripped down, not quality, product in there. And then these smaller cities then have a problem because they approve it. They're like, all right, we'll let a few in there. Grayson County being one of them. I've just recently seen it. There's a lot of production that's going on with some smaller one-off builders on the multifamily product. And Denison specifically came back and finally said, no more. Like, we're done with duplexes. We've let too many of you guys come in here. And now it's saturated because we don't have quality production going in there. There's not a more uniformed or streamlined product. And it's been so haphazard. Am I completely off base that some of these restrictions allow then for, worse things to happen?
I think what you're articulating here, Ashley, is just the need to have and the necessity of balance in terms of the local regulation that you see out there. And, on one hand, you can't have outright prohibitions of this product that provides an entryway for so many families that otherwise don't have the opportunity, and every day with all the issues that we're having are finding less opportunity for affordable and attainable product out there. But at the same time, you can't just make it a complete free-for-all. I mean, yes, there are codes out there that address life safety, but there is a lot of things in there in terms of how the product performs and how it looks that anyone with any eye for craftsmanship is gonna see it and say, all right, this definitely could be done a lot better. So it's a balance that we talk about all the time with cities here. It's interesting that you've got these things that I just mentioned before, the material mandates and restrictions and all these things. The good thing I'll say about a city like Frisco, since I just picked on them before, is that unlike Dallas, while they have high standards, they have a staff that will enforce them very consistently from one person to another. And you know what to expect when you go in there, and you can budget for it, and you can pretty much realize what impact or not the city's going to have on your margin. But if you deal with a city like Dallas, who can't perform or can't get your permit out on time, or doesn't tell you what to expect from individual to individual that you deal with there, that is often repugnant to a more quality builder. And I think a lot of these cities, especially up in Grayson County, Kaufman County, they're seeing growth that I didn't expect and they didn't expect for maybe the next 10 years. They're still trying to figure it out. They're probably a little bit caught off guard.
Yep.
But we also have to kind of fight against these prohibitions that are often rooted in this keep it country mindset, because their idea of preserving the character of the neighborhood is to try to keep everybody out and treat zoning like it's a admission scheme for a country club.
Gosh, yeah, that doesn't seem really fun. And especially when I think we kind of talked about, people keep on saying, don't California my Texas, and don't come in and bring a lot of these density projects in and all of these other things. And so they want the big lots, certain square footage, all of these other things. And what's happening, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when you're not creating affordable products and you're not thinking outside of the box, now we have a marketplace that everybody is likening to California. And that's an issue. All right, Sherry Fearbacher, high standards are needed, but once the standards have been set by a city, approve the permits that comply. Again, Sherry brings up a good point. She's also sometimes a thorn in my side. She's my mother, guys, so she's going to pop in there, and also my broker. So she's got good ones, and she won't. Sometimes she doesn't comply. However, she makes a good point. And what does she mean in accordance to that? We've talked about permits, and I think there's a lot of people that don't even really understand. They scream about affordability. They scream about, a timely product being produced, but nobody understands that a lot of times this is out of the builder's hands. So Phil, what does that mean in regards to, approve the permits?
Right. Well, and I'll address that. And I think this is one thing that's really important, that the home building community, the realtor community, we need to be united to be the pro housing community. We've got to have that voice for yes in my backyard, yes to making sure that everybody has a roof over their head and an affordable place to call home. And, the communities that we've been building that are attracting people from elsewhere, it's because of that affordability. And we have high standards too. And she's right that you can have high standards and you can still have attainable communities in this area. We've proven it. There are a lot of areas that have done it, but you have to have efficient and effective government that is able to interpret it and don't see every project like, pick on Dallas, and we'll probably do that a lot today. Don't see every project as a potential threat to the community. See it as an asset because it's somebody's home, or in the commercial sense, it's where jobs reside. And if there's clear-cut standards and everybody knows what that bar is, then it should be very predictable and very easy for operators of any size to budget and understand what they need to do, meet that goal, and get going. Nobody wants these delays. They're bad for business, but you can build in those standards into your loan and go forward and get the job done. You can't build these delays, and you can't build these surprises in, though.
Well, and I think that goes back to, the supply chain shortages are a completely different beast. But if we can still build in proper forecasting on the permitting process, and that type of process that is a little bit more within our control, then that does make it a little bit more bearable for these builders to go in. We talked about, the lag time with permits. I think you said it was about 12 weeks is what we're seeing a lot of times. And that's, upwards of 3 to 4 months to get a building permit. I shared with you guys that I just closed on a house in West Dallas. And that was last month, and we contracted in December of 2020. And it was a standard, like you said, Daniel, a pretty typical, 2,600 square foot home, nothing crazy, nothing wonky. It took up, I think, over 18 weeks to even get the initial permit to start grading the lot. And that was just unconscionable. And that's just creating a snowball effect for so many reasons. The builders, but then from the builders, then to the salespeople that are representing the builders, and then to the buyers that are under contract and the realtors. I think that's the hard part, is now we're just dealing with, everybody's maxed out. Realtors are maxed out, rightfully so, but the salespeople that are representing the builders are maxed out, and they don't have maybe the same type of skill set that we do as realtors that are in this, consistent, ever-changing resale market and new construction market. Our product's different every day. But when you take a salesperson that's consistently selling the same product, and they have those expectations set, and now the rug's been pulled out from underneath them and they're demonized every day. We're just all acting like, dogs backed into a corner and not getting anywhere. And so, yeah, Daniel, with the shortage of houses, what's a realistic timeline from slab to COO? Phil, is there even a realistic timeline?
Yeah. The the unforeseen stuff in terms of permit approvals aside, most production builders that I'm talking to now, they will, and obviously the bigger homes are going to take much, much longer. But as far as your typical run of the mill production builder home, what used to take 5 or 6 months pre-pandemic is now taking 10 to 12 months or longer. So it's not quite, but darn near close to double in some cases because of the supply chain issues, because of labor shortage, because of regulatory approvals in some cases. Every little disruption in the supply chain, and believe me, there's, one thing or another that people are freaking out in my inbox every week for the last 2 years. Things that I never thought we'd be having a problem with. We are, and like I said, I don't see those things changing anytime soon. There's some standards like with HVAC equipment that are going to upgrade for our state at the beginning of next year. That's going to create another situation that I'm not quite sure every builder is prepared for, but we're trying. So, we're handling the things that we can foresee, but we realize that the vast majority of them, just like anything in the pandemic here, we haven't totally been able to foresee.
And one thing actually, too, real quick, I would just add is, we let's try to control what we can control. Phil brought up a number of things that really are outside of the control, of the builder, with labor shortages and product. But really, when you start looking at, to your story, you said it was 18 weeks before you got the permit to even move dirt. I think that is a great opportunity for organizations like the Realty organization and the builders to really advocate and join forces and advocate and really talk to our city leaders and see what the problem is. Is it a staffing shortage? Is it a infrastructure a software type of issue? What is it? Because if we can focus on those types of issues and really have the local governments, push money to fix those issues that we're having, at least on the permitting process, that I think, can benefit not only us, but also the end consumer as well. And it really, starts to also bring in the fact that while cities love to spend taxpayer money with new programs, and new programs may need to be created for new problems that arise, I think you really have to look back at, the core function of government and how can they perform that function at 100% level, because it shouldn't take 18 weeks to get something approved.
No.
That's just crazy. But I think that's where, it just sounds very, very basic, but it really is. I mean, and I think that's what we need to tell our city leaders, whether it's in Dallas or McKinney or wherever else, so that look at the basic core function of government and let's make sure that we're doing those core functions efficiently and accurately and timely, and then we can talk about other programs like rental registration programs, et cetera, things of that sort. But it's just it's an issue that I think we both can really join hands on and really make some good effort, and I think we can make some change.
Well, and that's a good point. And what we talked about was humanizing the problem, because so often we're just looking at it from the builder's perspective. The big bad builder, they're making enough profit and everything else anyways. What about the homeowner that is going to reside in said home? And I know you guys can't stop looking at the comments because it's really hard not to do, and we'll get to it. But that's what the thing that I think we're missing, and what we've all said, if we can bring actual faces to this problem, and it not being a profit situation, it's a putting roofs over people's heads. That's the situation with this specific couple. They were good stewards of their money. They were good stewards of their time. They have a growing family. They had an infant at the time. They knew they wanted to grow their family and have another baby. And so for them, they were in a bungalow in a 100-year-old home, in the Kessler Park area. And they said, you know what, we know we probably need to do something bigger. And this is a great opportunity. This West Dallas community is near our caregivers, which are both of the grandmothers. And one's a principal of a local Dallas elementary school. And another gentleman that's going to seminary. I mean, these are good core people that give back to their community. And they said, we want to be forward thinking and put our family in a better spot. And here we are. And what was supposed to take 7 months ended up taking 15, 16 months to do that. And then halfway through, here's the problem. And this is not necessarily a builder's problem or a city problem, but then the problem is, like I said, it's a snowball effect. It runs downhill. And because everybody feels pressured, instead of sitting there and cooperating and communicating, we go to isolating and being argumentative. And I have multiple building deals going on right now. And in every situation, there is a different level of, I would say, an undertone of an intimidation factor that's going on, saying, hey, look, we can sell your house to 5 other people right now. If you're not happy, we'll let you out. I can sell the house for more right now. Well, I get that, but that's still a human being who has been, held hostage, for how long? And all they want is a little communication. And I get that the salespeople and the building companies are basically saying, we don't know. And I get that, but sometimes a we don't know is better than sitting there and saying, well, I can sell it to somebody else. And I think that's also a narrative that we need to be talking about. And Phil, you don't speak for every builder by any means, just like I don't speak for every realtor in the realtor organization. But I do think we can work on holding each other to a higher standard and doing better when it talks about dealing with these infrastructure challenges, with these supply chain challenges and everything else. Proactive communication can basically fix everything most of the time. And still, if it doesn't work, then yes, go and resell the product to somebody else. But have that communication in that regard, because these are still people's homes and we need to humanize the issue that's going on here right now.
Yeah, I think certainly that's the role. That's why our respective organizations exist, is to raise the bar. I was talking to some of the students a couple weeks ago up at Collin College. They've got a construction management program, which is just fantastic up there. And I was just kind of showing them what's going on in the market and what's happening. And they asked, hey, what skills do I need to learn? What's the secret to success? And I think they thought that it was going to be something, construction oriented. And I said, really, you've got to get to know people, and more specifically than that. And I think this relates to the theme of what you were talking about just now, Ashley, is that you have to have empathy. There is such a lack of empathy in this world right now, and in particular in our world, where you have to understand. I understand it every day because I see these issues, and I know that every $1,000 you increase the price of a new home, no matter how you do it, you're pricing 20,000 Texas families out of the market. Most of those families are exactly like the one that you described. They're great people that are seeing this, as I told the students, is the biggest investment they're ever going to make. There's a ton of emotion and investment in there because they, in many cases, have worked their whole life, and this is going to define what their family is going to be. You all in the real estate and realtor community, you do that better than most home builders, because you're sitting right alongside your client and you're working with them and you get to know them and you're advocating for them. And that was my advice to the students, is to just, you don't have to walk a mile in somebody's shoes. Just, walk 100 meters with them, get to understand where they're coming from. I wish a lot of the vendors and suppliers would do the same when they're giving builders the cold shoulder. I wish a lot of builders would do the same when they have, 20 or 30 people to choose from, and they just want to go on to the next one to sell the home because they know they can. These are the things that I think we have to, because we're not going to be in a cycle like this forever. Most of us have been doing this long enough, know that the one thing that's constant is things change. And if you want to be in this industry and in this market in the next cycle, memories are going to be long, and people are going to definitely remember how you conducted yourself during this time. And the ones that did well and had empathy, I think, are going to be set up for long-term success.
So it's really funny. My husband says it's my superpower, but everything gets logged here and it gets categorized like the Dewey Decimal System. And anytime I need to find a file, I seem to be able to retain that. Maybe not large things, but the small details do not get lost on me. And we've been here once before in the early 2000s. When builders could basically do anything that they wanted, name your price, do whatever. And then we got to a point again with obviously the housing crash where they needed the relationships again. And I think that's what we need to just focus on is that doesn't mean that you can't tee yourself up for success and set proper parameters that, listen, we don't have as much control over this process, and therefore you're going to have to be more understanding and understand this is what we're going to do to insulate the process, the timeline, the cost. But there are some variable things that are outside of our control that you're going to have to understand. That doesn't mean somebody has to sit there and pay an extra $100,000 for a property because some of their supply, costs have increased. We need to do better at forecasting those things, building those things in from the jump. Timelines, whatever happened to underselling and then exceeding expectations. And I think we need to do more of that. I want to be the superhero. I don't want to let people down at the final hour. I want to set realistic expectations and then do even better when it comes down to it.
Well, and that's the same thing, same dynamics happening with the permitting issues that we're having. Before pre-COVID, you could go sit down and talk to somebody and you see somebody's face who represents that project or that business. When they're a piece of paper or they're just something on a screen, it's less opportunity for empathy there.
That's why I always say, if you can't be in person, send a video because it's much harder to say something to my face. So I make sure my face is seen just like this anywhere I can. Like Nicole said, great observations, Phil. Memories are going to be long. Yes, and thank you for that reminder, Ashley. We have been here before, and the market will shift. Mm-hmm. And I think that shift is a little different. People are kind of likening this, again, to the housing crash of 2007, 2008, and that's not where we are. The shift just means that there will be some recalibration at some point. And maybe it's the aggression of the offers, the multiple offers we're getting and things like that. But values have been reset and people need to understand that because we have 1,000 people moving here every day. So the supply and demand factor when we've been underbuilding for, what would you say, Phil, 15 years?
Yeah, just about. And,
yeah.
You're right. I'm seeing the B word is going out there in headlines, bubble, and they see, hey, we started 60,000 homes and that's more than we started, back in, whenever 2009, 2010. Well, 1 million people showed up since then and they're still showing up. So there's no comparison. This isn't a bubble characterized in the way that we had one last time. But yes, there will be some shifting dynamics as rates go up, as the supply chain crisis lingers, and hopefully as we're able to get through this COVID thing and work those things out and get caught up, the dynamic will change. And a lot of you've seen this up and down and back and forth for a long time and know that, we'll be in a different cycle 5 years from now.
So Daniel, let's go back to you in regards to the other Daniel's comment, government level, who knows, given concessions for not working, I don't know, that doesn't help. I'm trying to really understand where my local affordable housing market is headed. And I think that's what we're all really struggling with right now because we can focus on profits, but I think we're all in this business for a reason because there would be a lot of other businesses we could be in that don't include housing and that primal function for everybody's livelihood and still make a good living for ourselves, but we're in it because we're passionate. And so we all feel this pain. So Daniel, what does that mean? Because we hear it from our local, municipalities and politicians and everything. We need affordable housing, bring affordable housing. But then when you try to bring an affordable housing product that maybe is in, a more density minded scope or something else, they go, no, that's not what we meant. So Daniel, can you peel back the curtain just a little bit and give us some ideas of what we're dealing with?
Sure. Yeah, no, there's a number of things there. We've always, heard the acronym, NIMBY or NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And I think, unfortunately, you see you see that happening, in the Dallas market and the DFW market and all over as well. But people want to build certain products that would allow for more affordable units, whether it be a zero lot line, home, or duplex, triplex, things of that sort, or accessory dwelling unit in the back of a home. But a lot of people just they don't want it because, again, as I said earlier, they want to preserve the character of the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And again, while I can appreciate that, ultimately I think it's really exacerbating the problem that we're having, not just here in this market, but again all over, that affordable housing is an issue. And what we know, inflation is what, 6 or 7%, whatever it was. But a lot of people aren't getting raises at the 6, 7, 8%, level either. So their income is not keeping up. So ultimately, people have to look further and further out for a more affordable product. So you have that part of it, where you have these neighborhood groups and others, who just say, not in my backyard, build it somewhere else. But then also you have to look at, from a tax, perspective as well, from a property tax perspective, that we may not have the same problem in the Dallas area, but I know like in the Austin area and many other areas, but especially in the Austin area, voters here just approved 2 years ago a 24% increase in the property tax rate to build a transportation rail system, which again is fine, but it's 24% in year one, but it's going to be even more in subsequent years, and you're going to be paying that for 30, 40, 50 plus years. But It's interesting. Then you read articles in the paper that, people say, oh my gosh, Austin's becoming, unaffordable. I can't live here anymore. Well, yeah, it's because, these local propositions, pass with 80+%. And we're seeing the same thing, again, in the Dallas market. So you really have to think about it from a property tax perspective, as well, that as values go up, and we'll see that actually here in a few weeks when value notices go out to everybody, that's, in my personal opinion, that's a good thing. Ashley, you know better than anyone, how many of your clients have ever asked you to find a piece of property that's going to go down in value in the next 5 years?
They love a depreciating asset. Yes, that's exactly what gets them excited.
Right.
Yes.
So, that's not why people are buying. They want it to appreciate. So, a value increase is good. Ultimately, what you don't like, what we all don't like, is the impending higher tax bill, expected tax bill that we're going to get because local entities don't lower the tax rate accordingly. So, it's one of those things that, you have everyone kind of pointing, at everyone else, but it going back to the question about affordable housing, I wish we could build more of that product. I think it really goes down to how we're going to define what that actually is. A lot of people, when they hear affordable housing, they think of kind of Section 8 housing. And that's just not, correct. It's just
correct.
But that's what everyone kind of, goes to. So I think we're really going to have a strong conversation, not at the local level, but even the state level and even nationally, of what do we want our communities to look like? Who do we want our neighbors to be? And do we want to make sure that, the folks that are working at the neighborhood sandwich shop or the restaurant or the office next door or whatever it is, that they can actually live in our communities and not have to have a 45-minute to an hour commute each way?
Well, we call that a lot of times workforce housing. I think I've heard, we've kind of redirected that, your primary workforce housing, the people that are working to make your community fantastic, that are working at these different establishments, whether they be, retail or office or anything else. It's the traditional workforce person that's not in a higher, this high-end tax bracket, which was where the majority of the population is. And I think the problem is that when you're talking about an affordability issue and supply chain and labor and land acquisition costs and all of these things, immediately that what goes into my head is, okay, then we need to make smarter product. So is that townhome product? Is that quad? That doesn't mean we necessarily have to go into a quadplex or a triplex. We can still give a traditional housing product, but if it's an attached housing product, then your land cost goes down. Your construction cost goes down because the amount of materials you need for each individual dwelling go down. I don't know, maybe I'm being too simplistic with it, Phil, but is that something where a lot of builders are kind of looking at more of this townhome adjacent product?
Yeah, they are. Density is a really easy solution here if you can do it. Daniel raised some outstanding points about just the dynamic that you have where seemingly everybody says, yes, we want this more inclusive housing, we want this workforce housing, but then when something like that starts popping up next door, their tone changes. And it's the challenge with this is that these anti-growth sentiments, they pop up in progressive areas, they pop up in conservative areas. You know, we know what happened on the West Coast and how things got expensive there because people that were privileged enough to have the housing were good, and they felt that their neighborhood achieved absolute perfection the moment that they arrived, and they spent, whether it was 5 months ago or 5 years ago, they threw a bunch of hurdles in place of anybody else coming to join them. And then on the conservative areas, characterizing that broadly, of course, I keep hearing that, like I said before, we need to keep it country, or very concerningly, actually went ballistic in a city council member over this, where they said we need to make sure the right kind of people are moving out here, and they were going to use their zoning powers to do it. And look, we've had some really important conversations on a lot of things dealing with equality and equity, especially over the last couple of years. I hope that we get to have that same conversation in terms of zoning, not just how it's been used, but how it continues to be used to more passively achieve some of the divisive ends that it's achieved. And that manifests a lot in density and those type of conversations. And I think, even though this isn't really a partisan issue, which makes it, very difficult because you can't throw it in the red corner and the blue corner and get behind them. Look at our organizations. We're not R's, we're not D's, we're H's. We're housers. We have to be, as Daniel said, the lead of the YIMBY movement here. We have got to talk to the rational, practical people that will listen to us and understand the need and be that voice, because I think we can be heard. I think we can articulate the practical effects that these decisions are having, whether they're meant to or not. And we can start having a reckoning that will make people more aware of the need to have more inclusive communities, both in the diversity of housing, but more importantly, the diversity of families that reside there.
And Ashley, it goes back to what you said earlier too. You have to put a face to it. It's not just concrete and wood, and plumbing. It's the young couple who just got married, who have a baby on the way. They want to, maybe they're first time home buyers, for their entire family, and they want to build, that wealth. And I think that's, and talk about generational wealth. I mean, we know that housing, homes, it's a major contributor to building that generational wealth. So you want people to be able to attain that American dream. And I know that kind of sounds, just, wonky or Pollyanna, but that's ultimately what we do. I mean, we want to put people, in that home, and hopefully it's a starter home. And then maybe in 4, 5, 7 years, whatever it is, then they go up, and get a larger home maybe. But building that generational wealth is key. And that's how we get people out of poverty, and off, government, programs, et cetera. But to your point earlier, putting that face to what we do and why we do it. Yes, we get a commission. Yes, builders, are in the business of making money. They're not in the business of just giving away homes at a loss. But it's not just about that. It's about, providing a product to someone that can build generational wealth off of and do something for their family. And putting a face to it, I think, will definitely help sell whatever policy changes we want to see in the future.
And I think that's something we take offline, and we kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday, was maybe there's an opportunity for us to join forces and sit there and talk about it from so many different layers, and bring people into the equation of, these are the people we're talking about. And this is a very inclusive group, because we talk about families, but then we also talk about veterans being discriminated against with their loan product that they're using right now. Because we can't use appraisal waivers and do different things like that. And then we've got the elderly population. And by elderly, I don't mean 90 needing assisted living, I mean, people that want to sit there and downsize from their home and maybe move closer to family members. I have so many clients that say, Ashley, why isn't there affordable product in some of these affluent areas that our relatives could move here? And whether it's a small casita, a garden home, a condo, a townhome with a primary, bedroom on the first floor. It's okay if it's a 2-story product. The grandkids can go and play upstairs, do whatever. And that's what we're not envisioning, is the fact that there is so much need across the board for quality, moderately priced housing for so many different eras of life.
Yep.
And we want to put it in one bucket. Like you said, Daniel, immediately when somebody thinks affordable housing, they go to subsidized housing. And there's nothing wrong with subsidized housing, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about moderately priced housing for people in different areas and lifestyle positions. First-time home buyer, aging up and wanting, less responsibility. Yes, Skylar, this fellow heavyweight 28 leadership graduate, that's something that we have to be thinking about. And the pandemic really changed that shift of, you don't want your family to be 600, 1,600 miles away. You want them to be closer to you, to be able to provide a better quality of care and concern. And I think that's what we have to be talking about at these city levels is, do you have an elderly individual that's in your family? Were you concerned that they weren't nearby during this? Gosh, I bet you we could put a face to the name there, because everybody wanted their families to move it. Nobody wants them to move with you, though. That's the other thing, too. Do you want them to move into your house, or do you want them to move in near your house? And I think those are the conversations that we need to be having to try to change that density conversation. It's not about apartments. Everybody always wants to say apartments, but this is not just an apartment conversation.
Yeah, it's really about, real quickly, Phil, if I may, just,
sure.
You talk about the pandemic, we're talking about accessory dwelling units. There were people who found themselves working at their kitchen table, which, was probably not conducive to a good working environment. So, they could have easily built, an accessory dwelling unit, behind their home if it was allowed, use that, on a temporary basis for an office or whatever you may want to use it for. But then long term, maybe then that becomes the place where your parents now come and live, so they can be closer, in to the family in their older years. So, it's just kind of, think that type of thinking, where I think the pandemic really did kind of change the dynamic. I think a lot. And I think, our policies and our thinking need to change with it as well.
Absolutely. Phil?
Yeah, it's funny. Daniel took the ADU thing right out of my mouth. That's the low-hanging fruit here. That's a way that you can keep existing property owners from being displaced, while also providing that new and innovative way to, shelter your family, whether you want them close or you don't want them close. You just want to bring somebody else in there and make a little extra money. But, back to, I hate next door, but I'll use it just to kind of see what the noise looks like out there, because these are the people that will incessantly dial up your local city council member. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's how they judge how their constituents feel.
Yes.
And there's a house not too far from my place here in East Dallas where it was going up, and somebody said, well, it looks like it could probably be an ADU, or it looked like it could probably be used as a Airbnb. And so this has got to be a party house, and let's call the builder's number, and let's call, council member so-and-so. And, the the pitchforks and torches were coming out, and I'll see the same conversation with attached housing going on all over the place in local city council. And the undertones of it always really concern me, because it's always those people. We don't want, if this shows up, then those people are coming. And it's usually kind of masked with traffic concerns and other things that have empirical studies that you pay a lot of an engineering firm a lot of money to do that dispel that. But the undertones there are concerning, and I think we have to bring that up and show it in the ugly light, because that's the attitude shift that has to happen, and it's an attitude that's prevalent no matter what your where you're at on the political spectrum, but I think something that collectively our organizations can work on and change the attitude towards who we accommodate in our community and how we go about doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Phil, and again, I think immediately we go to, oh, that's the other side that feels that way, right? That's the other political camp that feels that way. But like you said, once it comes into their backyard, it's very interesting how many people feel the same way about having some of these density projects nearby. And it's difficult because I see it. Of course, Sherry says again, she's not elderly, even though she acts like it sometimes. But she is a bit neurotic and she needed family close. Therefore, we actually moved last summer less than a mile away from each other. And that was also because we do life together, we do business together. And for us, that was something that just gave us a peace and a comfort level. And it also gave me extra empathy going through the process in an extreme real estate climate, and also realizing that was something that was very important to our family. It allows me to be able to advocate for my clients and their needs in that same capacity in a different way. And I think that's the hard part. It's really hard, like you said, Phil, to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, but just try to walk a little bit with them, just try to have a conversation, because I bet you we're all more in the middle than we think. Yes, we don't want the extreme things to happen. We don't want there to be, major infrastructure issues and tons of traffic and our property values. Gosh, that's the funny thing. We don't want density because it's going to lower our property values, but then they get angry because our property values rise because we don't have density. I'm like, which one do you want? If you don't want your property values to rise, then you should approve the density.
Yeah. I was just talking to a assistant city manager in Dallas today, and they were talking about, the role we would have to play in the city wanting to replace its traffic or its street lights, and they want to make everything LED, and they want to find other people to pay for it. I'm like, well, you'd have more money to pay for it if you were able to get permits out in a timely manner. And by the way, back to Daniel's point on keeping to the basics and blocking and tackling, in Dallas, all really this is going to do, if you're going to spend money on it, is it's just going to better showcase our ever-growing population of potholes, which probably should be a priority before we look at the lights.
That cracks me up. Immediately when you started talking about the LED lights, I'm like, why do they want to shine a brighter light on our poor infrastructure in Dallas and the streets? It cracks me up. And Daniel,
I didn't go to planning school, but yeah, I wonder the same thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Daniel, these are the things that you deal with all the time and you hear constantly, and you're here to help, as our association as well, open that dialogue and open those doors to say, what can we do to be a part of the solution? I'm very big on that. Like, there's a lot of problems. And if you're going to bring me a problem, that's okay. But bring me multiple solutions that we can investigate. And so I guess that's kind of what, I want to wrap up at the last few minutes that we're here. We've talked about a lot of problems. As far as supply chain, can't do anything about that. Locally. No, Dustin, it is not finally infrastructure week. So we're getting there though. But we can't do a lot about the supply chain shortages. Phil, you talked about, the program, the construction program at Collin College. And I met you about 5 years ago at one of the industry summits, and you talked about that. And I've been so passionate about that. My mother wanted me to get a college education, and I fought against it because I didn't see probative value in going to college. That wasn't for me. And that's not to say don't go to college. It just, for me, it was different. And I think for so long, we've pounded that into our children's heads that you have to go to college, when instead I know tradespeople that are making 2, 3, 4 times as much with no debt as the people that actually got a college education. So that is providing a solution to our labor shortage. It's just going to take a long time to catch up when most of the average labor is 40 to 50 plus years old. So we're working on that. But supply chain again is an issue. Labor shortage is an issue, but permitting and local, prohibitions and ordinances that are creating, a lot of barriers of entry for developers and everything. That is something we can have a voice as constituents, as realtors, as a part of these different organizations. So that's what I want to talk about the last 6 minutes is what can we do to help change the narrative a little bit? Because we always want to hard press on taxes. We always want to do that. That's what everybody wants to do the microscope on. But we've talked about it's about the budget. And it's about holding people accountable that are setting the budget, and it's holding people accountable that are making the decisions on the zoning and the city ordinances and the permitting and everything else. So Daniel, I'm going to let you talk first, as far as what can we do as an organization, as the real estate industry to help become a voice and a vehicle for change?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think the answer, believe it or not, I think it's easy. Just get involved. These people at the local level, your local elected officials are local elected officials. They're people, and when they don't hear from us, they kind of just do their own thing, which that may be okay, but we're there as voters, as neighbors, to help them make the right decisions for our communities. I don't want anyone to take away that we're vilifying elected officials, whether it's at local level, state level, or national level. Look, we have to work with them, and look, if we don't like what they're doing, we don't like the priorities they're setting in the budget, then guess what? Just go to the polls and unelect them. And certainly, we've done that as a Realty organization. We've gotten people unelected and we've gotten people elected. So
yes.
You just have to just be very respectful and make your voice heard. But I think that's something that we as an organization, as the Metro Tech Association, as well as with our partners at the Builders Association, is we need to do better of just communicating with our local elected officials, letting them know what we're seeing there in the local marketplace. Because a lot of times they're just so inundated with all sorts of different things, whether it's LED lights or potholes or permitting. But we need to let them know what's happening, and not just what's happening to us as a practitioner, but what's happening to the family, what's happening to that individual that we're trying to help, get them into a home. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, and I think we can certainly get there. But working with the mayor, working with the city councils, all across our area, we need to do that and better coordinate with our partners as well.
And a sentiment to that is we need to abandon the not it mentality. Well, that's not my job. That's not my thing to advocate for or to do. And that's why we're in this position. Again, as realtors, there's a lot of things that aren't my job. I'm not the gardener. I'm not the photographer. I'm not the home stager. Even though I pretend I am all these things, I'm not the plumber. I'm not the title company. I'm not the lender. But anytime something goes wrong with any of these aspects of the transit, it's my problem. And I think we have to be more accountable with the fact that, okay, as the Builder Association, as the Realtor Association, it's not our problem, it's the city's problem, but it is our problem. And now how are we going to present a unified front to try to figure out how we do this? And yes, Daniel, many hats, of course. That's what we do best. For me, it's more of figuring out a strong unified force in front, I think is going to make it really hard for them to say we can't listen. And I think we come about it in several different angles. And instead, maybe there's an opportunity for us to broker a coalition here and sit there and say, hey, this is what we are going to do. We are going to humanize this issue. And we're going to talk about the different layers and the things that you guys want to see. And I think Daniel mentioned it again, that the cities want the additional revenue, but they don't want the infrastructure degradation or that kind of accelerated in different things, the density. We've got to figure out what are all the issues, what are all the blocks, and let's find a unified way to not combat it, but at least humanize the situation so they have to listen for it. Nicole, yes, let's do a broker coalition. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I mean, I'm always.
And Ashley, it's, if you just look at our membership too, I think we talked about this before, but we have so many new realtors, who are coming into the marketplace, if you will. And that's great. Love them. We embrace them. But, if you're a newer agent, 2 to 3 year new, I get it. You're trying to put food on the table and you're trying to just, do the hustle. And I appreciate that. And I encourage you to continue to do that. But if you want to be in this business for a long time, you also have to give back to your industry. And what I mean by that is you have to be involved in governmental affairs, in the programs, and be willing to just make a phone call or send an email, whatever it may be. But that's where we can also make a difference as well. Not only working with people like Phil and good people like Phil and others, but also within our own organization.
All right, so Phil, I'm going to put you on the hot seat, and we're at 6:30. Everybody, bear with us for another minute or two. But Liz Rourke, who is an awesome consummate volunteer for our Realtor Association and a broker, she asked, "What's Phil's take on this?" Because I think that's the big thing too. I don't want to put words in your mouth as the Builders Association or anything else, but how do you feel about us trying to, whether it's a unified front or what we can do to help change the narrative?
Yeah, I think that's hopefully the theme of what I've been saying here is that we collectively are the housers here, and collectively we've got to work together if we're going to solve housing issues. You've got a great advocate there with Daniel. You've got a great advocate with Matthew Church. We're working together on a lot of things, dealing with the city, dealing with the state, some federal stuff too. But really, at the end of the day, elected officials hear from us all the time. We know mostly the ins and outs of how things go and how some of these different regulations work, but you bear the impact of it. And the people that we're talking to, they would much rather hear from you all than to hear from us. They want to hear what the impact is. You don't have to know all the nuances and all the details of every single issue. But if you're able to tell somebody in power how this impacts you or how this impacts your client, you're going to be as effective of an advocate as anybody out there. And that's really how you can make a difference. And I bet all of you listening, you probably have all corners of the political spectrum. And I'd imagine that in this conversation, hopefully you've agreed with just about everything that we've said, no matter, what red corner, blue corner, somewhere in between. But also, beyond the politics stuff, you'd mentioned the career path in schools. And, it's really frustrating because I think a lot of and my wife's a teacher, so I can say this, is that a lot of our education system is focused on making kids mediocre at what they aren't interested in instead of extraordinary at what they are interested in. So what we can do is get in there, get in front of them, and let them know that here's the path that we took. Here's what I wish I could tell my, 18-year-old self, or whatever the age of the kids that you're talking to, and be that resource for them, because you may just be, what they are interested in. And there are programs like the Collin College program that, for $15,000 with their new 4-year program that they're launching in the fall, you can get through the whole thing, all 4 years. And I bet you some of you, if you have kids in college, you've written a check for a semester. That's probably as much or more than that. So, those students are going to go in there. They're going to get a job their first year. They're going to be making, in many cases, $70,000 to $80,000, and they're going to be like, what student debt? We're not going to have any budget, and we're going to have a great career ahead of us. And I know we've all taken different paths to get to where we are, but we have to talk to our educators and make sure that we're doing what we all want to do, and that's to make our kids extraordinary at what they're interested in.
So here's how I'm going to sum it up. Let's encourage our kids to play to their strengths, and I'm a huge advocate in that. And get involved. That's something that anybody can do. And if anybody is curious that has been on this or will watch this, feel free to reach out to myself. You can find me on social media, Ashley Gentry, and message me directly. And whether it's getting to Daniel or Phil or whomever else, you can ask me your questions or say, I just want to get involved and I don't know where. I think so many times that's the barrier of entry with a lot of people. They just don't know who to ask or where to go. And I'm happy to help facilitate that. The other thing is use your voice. Maybe it's not a coalition, but your voice does matter, and start having the conversation. And I think that's extraordinarily important as well. But most, imperatively, keep having this dialogue, guys, and inform yourselves and understand where the issues and the nuances are. Because if you can sit there and say it's an affordability issue, that's really not doing it justice. It's not an affordability issue. We need to hold our local officials accountable, and that also means vote. And when we have less than 10% of our local populations voting on these very imperative bond elections and elections to put our local officials in these seats, you can't sit there and gripe and moan and complain if you don't actually show up to go vote. So that's the big thing that I'm going to leave everyone with is vote accordingly, ask the questions, and get involved. So we appreciate all the comments for the great conversation. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We appreciate your support. Daniel and Phil, thank you for taking your evening with us. And I appreciate, again, all the comments in here. And we'll be in touch, and we'll see you guys again soon, of course. But have a great evening, and we'll talk to you very soon.